Okay, everybody, it's 11, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Everybody should be able to hear me now, so maybe just a few people type in the chat that you can hear if the audio is good. I won't waste any of Jen's time. Let me just mention a couple of things. As usual, for those of you who've done this before, you can chat with other participants on the right. If you have a question for the presenter, Jen Austin, you can type those in the questions below. So Jen has an iPad in front of her. Your questions will appear there, and she'll answer them, as they fit into her presentation. Also, there was a question about this. As usual, we'll record this. So if anybody loses their internet or has to go or is interested but just couldn't participate now, you can email me for a link. My email is just Kobe Lund, COBYLUND. That's N as in November, D as in December, @datafinch.com. So email me if you want a link or if you have questions or just any follow-ups. So before we get to Jen, I just want to say that Dr. Jen Austin went to grad school with my wife and I and has always been amazing. So I think that you're all in for a treat here. She has, since I've known her, always excelled at teaching, and she's a fantastic presenter. She's at the University of South Wales now, so she's not as close as we'd like her to be, but kind of living the dream around the world. So with that, I'll just turn it over to her.
Great. Thanks, Kobe. So I'm delighted to be participating in today's webinar. The title is Tips for Working Effectively in Mainstream Education, and I want to make a confession right off the bat. This is not going to be a data-based presentation, so if you're looking for data today, you might want to log off right now. This presentation is based on my personal experiences working with schools for quite a number of years now, and I think probably a better title for this presentation is Some Lessons I Learned the Hard Way. So what I'm going to try to share with you today are some of the challenges that I've encountered over the years working in mainstream education classrooms, and hopefully give you a few tips that might be helpful to you. Now, just to tell you a little bit about me, as Kobe said, we were together at Florida State. We both did our, and along with Janet as well, we did our PhDs with John Bailey. My specialization is in behavioral assessment and intervention, primarily in mainstream schools. Lots of issues around classroom management and teacher training. I work a lot with kids with emotional and behavioral disorders, which are somewhat understudied population in behavior analysis. And I'm also involved in some parent training. As part of my my academic career, I've helped develop the graduate training programs at the University of South Florida, Cal State Fresno, and the University of Houston Clear Lake. As Kobe mentioned, I currently live in Wales. I've been here for about 8 years now. Now, I don't want to offend anyone's prowess in geography, but just to let you know where Wales is, it's part of the United Kingdom. It's a different country from England. There it is right there on the map, the little purple one. We're right there at the bottom in the south. And here at the University of South Wales, I direct the USW Behavior Analysis Unit, which houses our undergraduate and postgraduate academic programs and also our behavior analysis clinics. Now, if you don't know much about Wales, we're known for our rugby team, which is a bit of a bizarre sport, but you definitely grow to like it if you live here in the Celtic nations. We have more castles in Wales per square mile than any other country in Europe. This is a picture of a castle that I drive by every day on my way to work. Unfortunately, I don't work there. This is the flag for Wales, which is pretty cool. It has a dragon on it. And there are more sheep in Wales than there are people, so that's another important fact for you to know. So The purpose of today's webinar is to highlight some areas in which behavior analysts can support children and their teachers in mainstream education. I know a lot of us probably got our start working with children or adults with disabilities, and we certainly have a lot of strengths in that area in behavior analysis. Some of you may already be working in mainstream education, but if you're not, I'm hoping today's talk might help you kind of get some of the baseline knowledge that you might need to go in and start doing some work with these populations. Now, as I mentioned before, the primary goal of the webinar today is to identify some common mistakes that behavior analysts might make when working in schools. Now, I'm putting this within the context of mainstream education because that's where I do most of my work. But I think if you work in other contexts, hopefully you're going to find some of these mistakes familiar as well. And of course, most importantly, we're going to propose some ways of avoiding some of those mistakes. Now, if we think about discipline or behavior problems in schools, there are many. Here are just a few: fighting, bullying, violence, defiance, noncompliance, being late, trespassing, tobacco use, alcohol use. We're seeing students bringing weapons to school. And of course, you can insert your favorite discipline problem here. So there are many things for us to work with as behavior analysts working in schools. And of course, we can help solve these types of problems. That's absolutely what we do. If there's a behavior problem, bring it to us, and chances are we're going to be able to make some progress in solving that problem. However, what I find in working in schools is we frequently get referrals when problems have become so severe that the teacher or the student is in crisis. And these are important problems to solve, absolutely. But it's interesting to look at some of the data on the types of problems that teachers find most difficult in their classrooms. There was a recent report from an organization in the UK called Ofsted, which is the Offices of Standards of Education. So it's the equivalent of the Department of Education in the UK, but they actually conduct inspections of schools. And they did a report where they surveyed a number of teachers to find out what teachers reported as the most problematic behaviors. And probably not surprising to a lot of you is that the most problematic behaviors were these low-level, high-frequency disruptions, as opposed to the more severe crisis-like behaviors that I mentioned in the previous slide. But these are the types of behaviors that wear staff down and interfere with learning. So we're talking about the things like simple noncompliance, kids who won't stay in their seats, kids who won't be quiet, those types of things which just kind of sap a teacher's will to live. So this Ofsted report further found that teachers who were newly trained reported that their initial training contained very little specific guidance about how to understand behavior and manage those behaviors. And I think for any of you who have worked in schools, this is not a surprise to you. Teachers often come to school woefully unaware of how many behavior problems they'll actually have to encounter as part of their day-to-day teaching, and also woefully undertrained in understanding and managing those behaviors. So the findings of this Ofsted report were consistent with previous research, which shows that teachers often feel that they lack those adequate skills to deal with common behavior problems. Now, why is this important for us to think about these everyday problem behaviors? Well, it turns out that teachers with less confidence about their teaching and behavior management skills are more likely to refer children for special education services. So I think this comic kind of sums it up, that a teacher has been teaching for 23 years and still struggles with some behavior problems. And when we have teachers whose lack of confidence in their own skills is increasing the rate of special education referrals, what that says to us is potentially some of those children who are being referred for special education could have been effectively served in mainstream education had their teachers had better skills. So We have a lot to do in schools, many, many problems to solve. So there are a lot of opportunities for behavior analysts to make a difference in schools in many different capacities, whether they're working in mainstreams or special schools across a range of populations and behavior problems. But to make the most of those opportunities, there are at least a couple things that I think we need to think about. One of those is that we need to consider the full range of behaviors that teachers identify as important. When you ask teachers what are their most problematic behaviors, most teachers are not going to tell you fighting and violence and trespassing and vandalism. They're going to tell you about these what I call garden variety behavior problems that wear them down on a daily basis. Also, I think that we need to ensure that when we go into a school, that we're not just focusing on the student's problem, but we're also focusing on the problems that the teachers might have, particularly with regard to their own learning histories about managing behaviors, and also the skill deficits they may have in understanding and managing behaviors. And then also we need to ensure that we're working as effectively and efficiently as possible. Now, this is true wherever we're working. And knowing about and avoiding some common pitfalls can be very helpful. Now, mistakes are valuable. I've made a lot of them over the years, and that's why I'm able to give you this presentation to help you potentially avoid some of these things. But mistakes take time, and coming up with different ways of doing things takes time. So hopefully by talking about some of these pitfalls, we can make things a little bit more efficient for some of you who might be working in schools. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is talk about a few of the mistakes that I've made in the past and that I've seen other behavior analysts make in their work in schools. And I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've come up with as potential solutions for overcoming some of these potential errors that we make. So I think one of the first errors that behavior analysts make when they go into a school setting is focusing first on the problem student instead of having a look at the classroom. Now, our science very rightly teaches us to study behavior at the individual level, and I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do that. But we have to think about classrooms as something like this. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember sea monkeys, but sea monkeys were these little things that you could buy, and then they lived in a little aquarium. So you created a little ecosystem for these sea monkeys. And I kind of think about classrooms as these little ecosystems where what you do within that ecosystem or what is happening within that ecosystem can make the difference between whether our little sea monkeys thrive and grow, whether they float to the top. So we need to think about that contained environment in which these little organisms are living and behaving. Now, I don't know how clearly you can see this slide, but if you were to order your sea monkeys here, you got a growth guarantee in writing. Unfortunately, we don't get any growth guarantees for social skills or academics in schools. We need to put those guarantees in place. Okay, so let's think about what's going on in this little classroom ecosystem. Well, when I go into a classroom, one of the first things I look at is whether or not I can spot the problem child. Could I spot that child without anyone pointing him or her out to me? Is that child the only child with substantial behavior problems? Or are there a lot of behavior problems going on in the class? If there are a lot of behavior problems going on in the class and that target child doesn't stand out, what that says to me is there may be more of a classroom management issue there than necessarily an issue with that particular child. I remember going into a year 3 classroom, which is about the equivalent of 3rd grade in the States. And we were doing some research on challenging behavior. And we asked the teacher, do you have 1 or 2 children who have some frequent low-level challenging behaviors that we might be able to use for this research study? And she said, take your pick. She had about 25 kids in her classroom, and she said that we could use almost any of those kids in our study. So the first thing we did prior to starting that study was have a look at her classroom management skills. So we want to assess if there are many children with problem behaviors, are there good classroom management strategies in place? Because I can tell you something, many problem children will magically disappear when a few key things are in place. First of all, classroom expectations are clearly and positively defined. So children know what they're supposed to be doing and when they're supposed to be doing it. Lots of classrooms have rules. Not all classrooms have very clear and positively defined expectations. Also, if teachers are providing feedback on behavior consistently, teachers who are consistently engaged with their students, who are looking for behaviors to reinforce, that are providing that reinforcement, and also corrective feedback when it's needed, tend to have fewer behavior problems than those teachers who provide feedback inconsistently. And also, in the classroom, when children meet expectations, does that result in positive reinforcement? You've all been in classrooms, I suspect, where the kids who are best get the least amount of attention. So the better your behavior, the less attention you get. And that's a pretty common phenomenon in schools. So teachers who tend to have fewer behavior problems are those teachers who are using more positive reinforcement to strengthen those behaviors and provide feedback on what children need to be doing and the degree to which they're meeting those expectations. So what you may find when you go into a classroom is the solution that you come up with may have nothing to do with the kid who was the reason why you were there in the first place. So the takeaway message is don't miss the classroom context. Look at that ecosystem and see what's going on there, and decide whether or not this is a classroom management issue first. So many times the best thing that we can do for teachers and for their students is to scale up their classroom management skills. And this is easier to do than you think, because the brilliant Bear, Saunders, and Wolf, way back in 1969, came up with something called the good behavior game. And it has loads of data to show that it's effective. And it's not just that it's evidence-based that makes the good behavior game so cool. Here are a few other things to know about the good behavior game. It's easy to teach teachers to do it. We can teach teachers how to use the good behavior game in about 15 minutes. Then we coach them for a few minutes and off they go. We come back and check in with them every once in a while, but because teachers access reinforcement of student behavior change so quickly with the good behavior game, it maintains their engagement in those skills. It's easy for teachers to integrate into their everyday routines. It's highly adaptable. My PhD student and I are actually working on a bit of research that shows the different ways that you can adapt the good behavior game to different classroom settings and populations. And no matter what we do to this thing, it still works. Also, it's resistant to treatment integrity failures. Ray Jocelyn and Tim Vollmer at the University of Florida are doing a bit of research on the good behavior game now that shows that even when teachers implement the good behavior game with relatively low integrity, they still get changes in kids' behaviors. Now, today I don't have time to go through all of the ins and outs of the good behavior game with you. I will be doing another training in January where that will be one of the topics of that training. But I do encourage you, if you're not familiar with the good behavior game, to go away and read some of the research, because it's relatively easy to teach yourself to do it and then teach teachers to use it as well. I refer to the good behavior game as the holy grail of classroom management systems, and it's usually where I start when I go into a classroom and I find that there are multiple children with problem behaviors. Okay, so on to mistake number 2. Mistake number 2 is always starting the behavior analytic process with a functional behavior assessment. Now, every time I say this, I'm always worried that they're going to revoke my membership in ABA, and I'll no longer get subscriptions to Java, and I'll be blackballed from behavior analysis. But I'm standing by my commitment that it's not always necessary to start the behavior analytic process with a functional behavior assessment. Now, this is really similar to mistake number 1 within the classroom context, but I think it bears repeating for a few reasons. So just to remind us, when we work in mainstream schools, we always want to start our assessment at the classroom level. So when you go into a classroom, don't start the FBA, don't start the informant assessment with that particular kid or the descriptive assessment with that particular kid who's the referral. Start the assessment at the classroom level. See whether or not there are things within that ecosystem that need to be changed, and when you change those things, have you solved the problem for that target kid? Going back to the story that I shared with you before about the year 3 teacher who told us to pick any of her children in their classroom as potential participants in our research project, we taught her how to use the good behavior game. And after she was consistently using the good behavior game in her classroom, we only had 1 participant left. So it is highly effective, and it shows that you really can use these broader interventions to make a lasting difference in the lives of children at school. Okay. Now, you may look at that classroom context, and you do decide that the classroom management is good, or you've scaled up the classroom management skills of the teacher and that target child still has problem behaviors. Well, there's no downside to starting with the classroom context first, because if an individualized intervention is needed, it's likely to be more efficient and potentially of lower intensity if it's delivered within the context of a well-managed classroom. Chaotic classrooms are not good places to be. Not for kids, not for teachers, not for behavior analysts. It's hard to get things done in a chaotic classroom. So the more that we can get that classroom structure defined and effective, the better off all of us are going to be. Also, working first at the classroom level gives you the opportunity to provide a positive school environment for more than the target student. So the school gets some freebies out of you. So you may have been there for 1 or 2 target kids, but by teaching the teacher good classroom management skills, you're giving a positive school environment to everyone within that classroom. And also, you're giving the teacher a lasting and generalizable skill set that she can take away with her and use for years to come. We always should be involving teachers in the implementation of interventions and teaching them how to implement those interventions. But those interventions that we teach them for individual children may or may not be generalizable for another child or another classroom. If you teach them good classroom management skills, they can take that away with them and keep it till the end of their teaching careers. Okay, so on to our third mistake. The third mistake that I made relatively frequently and gave me quite a crisis of confidence in my behavior analytic skills is trying to do analog FAs with typically developing children. Now, here's what we know about typically developing kids. They are highly in tune with their environments. And this makes them learn very quickly how to access their reinforcers. They tend to be really efficient, and their discrimination skills are finely tuned. They know what they want. They know who they can get it from. They know exactly what behaviors will lead to their reinforcers. And many times these contingencies are highly specified for children. One person's attention is not necessarily equivalent to another person's attention. One type of escape is not necessarily equivalent to another type of escape. So we need to remember these types of things about typically developing children, and that they have very highly refined discrimination skills. So as a result, here's what we typically get when we try to do these analog FAs, where we're taking the child out of the classroom context. Perhaps we're running the FA, we're someone that the child doesn't know. We've read Iwata et al. We know exactly how we're going to run these conditions. And here's the kid we had in the classroom. And here's the kid we have during the FA. They just don't respond the same way in those highly contrived environments. I've tried a lot of analog FAs in schools. I've never had one that actually gave us a good indication of what was going on with the child. So if we get to the point where we need to do a functional analysis in order to inform our treatment planning, then we need to make sure that we're using an FA that's going to be valid with typically developing kids and get us a result that's actually going to be useful to us in helping plan a strategy to improve that child's success. So here are some considerations to think about in doing functional analyses with typically developing kids. One is that you usually need to involve teachers in the arrangement of the contingencies for the FA. So typically it's your teacher or your teaching assistant who's going to be needing to run those conditions within your FA. Because of those discrimination skills that children have, they're not going to respond to you in the same way that they respond to their classroom teachers or paras within the classroom. Also, I strongly believe that we need to proceed classroom functional analyses with descriptive assessments so that we can inform the contingency arrangements by those observations in the classroom. Sometimes teachers aren't aware of the ways that they reinforce behavior or the EOs that they set up for problem behaviors, but with a trained eye of a behavior analyst, we can start picking out what those contingencies are so that that information can be integrated into the functional analysis protocol. So we need to be looking for what are the EOs, the SDs, and the reinforcers that naturally occur that evoke and maintain that behavior within the classroom context. And then we can use that information to train our teachers to run the FAs for us. Another consideration that you'll want to think about with doing FAs with typically developing kids is you often need to include a peer attention condition. Now, this isn't something that we see in most standard FAs, particularly for individuals with intellectual disabilities or autism, but for typically developing kids, this can be a really important condition to include. So you need to think about that in terms of which test conditions you're going to run. FAs, because we're going to have to get teachers to do them, likely to make them valid, they have to be efficient and easily integrated into the classroom environment. If they're too difficult to do, then it's not reasonable to expect teachers to take time away from teaching to run these FA conditions. So this typically rules out multi-element evaluations of multiple putative reinforcers, so kind of the classic multi-element design where we're testing attention, escape, sensory, tangible, and potentially different variations of attention. Because if you think about it, you need 3 to 5 sessions of about 10 minutes each for 4 to 5 conditions. If you're running all of your conditions plus your control condition, you're expecting that to happen in a busy classroom. So you may want to do a quick calculation of how long that would take a teacher to do. You can do that if you like, but here's going to be the outcome. It's not going to happen. It's much too resource intensive for most teachers. If they've signed on to help you with a research study, sometimes you can persuade teachers to do this. If you're there as a consultant trying to gather information to inform your intervention, then multi-element evaluations and multiple potential reinforcers is probably not going to be something that a teacher is going to be willing or able to do. And that's fair enough. There are emerging within the literature some more efficient options for functional analyses, and these are kind of the new kids on the block for functional analyses. Trial-based FAs, we're having a lot of luck with those. We certainly aren't the first ones to publish something on trial-based FAs, but we were the first researchers to publish a validation of trial-based FAs within a classroom context. So that came out last year in Java. Another thing that's gathering a bit of steam within the FA world is synthesized FAs. And Hanley and his colleagues published a paper on using synthesized FAs, which are essentially FAs that are initially informed by an informant assessment and then have combined conditions to kind of tease out functions of behavior. Now, again, I don't have time today to go through this. In the training in January, I will be walking folks through the trial-based FA process and talking about how that can be adapted within a classroom context. But again, I have references at the end of the presentation, so you can go away and have a read of some of these strategies for yourself. Okay, so on to our fourth mistake, which is failing to acknowledge that educators might not expect a prolonged assessment phase. Now, we have encountered this in some of our work in schools, and it's something that we need to be aware of in terms of meeting teacher expectations. Now, when we come to a classroom, teachers rightly want solutions, and they usually want them yesterday. By the time we get there, teachers are often in crisis, and they want us to come in telling them what needs to be done to solve the problem. And we don't work that way as behavior analysts. We need to get a handle on why the problem is occurring before we can actually do something about it. And that goes for whether or not we're intervening at the classroom level or the individual level. So each of our, or any of our treatments is going to be preceded by some type of assessment or analysis. And I think that we assume that most people would think that way. And in my experience, most people don't. They have a problem and they come up with a solution. They tell you they have a problem. They want you to come up with a solution. That middle bit of figuring out why the problem occurs is not something that a lot of people think about. And if you think about most school interventions for problem behavior, they tend to be based on punishment. Things like suspending kids or expelling them or making them write 5 million sentences. All of those types of procedures are solutions that miss that middle piece, which is finding out why the behavior occurs. So we need to do a little bit of teaching around that part of the process. Now, the problem is that sometimes it's difficult to predict how long that assessment is actually going to last. And teachers can lose faith in us if we take too long to offer them help. So we really need to be preparing them for this process. So a few things to think about in helping teachers cope with the assessment period is making sure that we explain the behavior analytic process as part of our initial conversation. So it's not just something that comes at the end where we say, okay, I'll be back on Monday to start the assessment. We need to make sure that that's all clear and open. We need to tell them why the assessments are necessary. Analogues to medicine can sometimes be helpful in this regard. So talking about when you go to your doctor, you would like for them to do some type of assessment before prescribing medication, and it's the same with us. And then also telling them what we hope to accomplish by conducting the assessment. I think we also need to set a realistic time frame and try in earnest not to exceed that. It's hard to predict sometimes how long an assessment will take, but my general rule of thumb is if I don't have a handle on it within 2 weeks, I've still got to start trying something that's going to provide some support for this teacher. Because to teachers, it often looks like we're sitting around doing nothing when we're doing an assessment, and it can be very frustrating for them. And as I said before, can cause them to lose a bit of faith in the process. So if your assessment is somewhat prolonged, then make sure that you're keeping the teacher in the loop. Tell her or him what you're doing every day, what the results of your assessment are, and where you're up to with that assessment. Okay, here's another one. Very, very guilty of this one, I must admit, when I first started working in schools. I learned pretty quickly to calibrate my expectations, but sometimes we go into schools and we behave as if teachers have nothing to do but implement our interventions. Now, in my experience, most teachers are hardworking and they want to do the right thing, but they have a lot to deal with, as this comic very clearly shows. If you ever go into a school and stay there for the entire day, you'll have a lot of respect for the things that teachers do on a day-to-day basis and all the challenges that they have to deal with. So it's no wonder that teachers sometimes struggle to implement our interventions with integrity. It's no wonder that they sometimes struggle to do what we ask them to do. So we need to be smart about setting up a situation where treatment integrity is likely. So there are a few questions that I like to ask myself or that I like to keep in my mind when I'm designing interventions for use in schools. First is, did I involve the teacher in designing the intervention? I think that's incredibly important to give the teacher ownership of the intervention. You can even let it be the teacher's idea. You can guide the teacher to coming up with the ideas that are going to be critical in the design of that intervention, and then let his or her creativity kind of guide how that intervention might be delivered. But we really need to have them involved in the design of that intervention. Also ask yourself, did I actually take his or her suggestions into account? If you're involving a teacher just for the sake of involving them with no plan to take their concerns or suggestions into account, then you're probably not going to get much benefit from this particular step in increasing your treatment integrity. So we need to take those suggestions on in earnest. Now, we can't always incorporate every suggestion, but we do need to try to work with teachers to find a balance. Also, was I completely candid in estimating how long the intervention would take to implement? So within a teacher's regular class day, am I asking the teacher to implement this throughout the day? Is it just for a particular period during the day? And have I let the teacher know how long that intervention is going to take to implement? Because we really don't want any surprises on the teacher's part with regard to what the intervention takes. And also, we need to set realistic expectations about how long it may take an intervention to work. Teachers often expect a quick solution to the problem. And for many long-standing behaviors, it doesn't work that way. Behavior changes gradually and over time, and we need to prepare teachers for that. Teachers sometimes ask me, how long will it take you to fix this problem? And what I say to them is, how long has it been a problem? Because if it started yesterday, I can probably fix it by tomorrow. If it's been going on for a little while, it may take us a little while to fix it. So let them know that they may be in it for the long haul and not to lose faith. Also, did I properly train the teacher to implement the intervention? And did I train an additional person to implement the intervention as a backup to give the teacher a bit of respite from implementing that intervention? I think it's also important to coach intervention implementation, meaning that we're there alongside the teacher as they're implementing the intervention to help and support them at least the first time that they do it. And then also, did I follow up quickly to see if the teacher had any problems or if any adjustments were needed? Now, a lot of times the context in which we work in schools, we're there one day and we're not back for a week or two. That's too long for a teacher to wait with an intervention that isn't working for him or her. Now, you may not be able to physically go back to the teacher after the implementation, but we can text, we can email, we can give them a phone call to see if there are any adjustments that need to be made with the intervention. Because at the end of the day, a great intervention that never gets implemented is not a great intervention. So we really need to be mindful of setting up treatment integrity from the beginning. All right. Here's another mistake, believing that everyone thinks data are important. Don't know how many people have experienced this. Teacher hasn't completed a data sheet, or they lost it, or you found him filling it out right as you arrived. Well, we love data, but not everyone else does. We can't expect other people to love it unless we give them good reasons for loving it. It's up to us to arrange an environment so that data are valuable. So, most teachers are not trained about what an evidence base means, much less about the importance of data on making decisions about behavior. Now, this is an indictment of teachers. I used to teach in a college of education, and I know that learning about science and evidence is not a huge part of teacher education programs. So it's not the way that they typically think. Even if we explain this, they often forget to collect data because it's not necessarily a top priority for them because they have long histories of making decisions without the benefit of data. So we need to make data collection practical for teachers. Just like we design interventions with teachers, we need to design or adapt our data sheets in collaboration with the teacher. We need to realize that all-day data collection is great, but that's not always possible for teachers within the context of all the other things that they have to do. So what we might do is collaborate with the teacher to agree times when he or she can commit to collecting data, where that is a period where they can commit to you that they're going to collect data. And if possible, just like you might coach intervention implementation, you can coach data collection as well. And check in to see how data collection is going. We also need to make data reinforcing. Any data that you collect share it with the teacher and explain how and why you collected it. You also need to consider that many teachers are asked to collect data that they never see again. From their perspective, it just goes into the black hole of data. We need to change that. If we ask someone to collect data for us, then we need to tell them how we're going to use that data, and then we need to show them that we have used it. Graph teachers' data, come up with some meaningful way of displaying that data, come back to the teacher and show them that what they did actually affected the outcome of what you're doing. And also, remember that data collection is an effortful behavior, so we need to reinforce it. Okay, just a couple mistakes here, a couple more mistakes to go. Number 7 is failing to build rapport. I really like this comic because it summarizes how I felt in some schools. So don't be silly. Teachers love that we brought in a behavior analyst. Well, if the teacher's in crisis and they want you there, that's a good situation. If someone else has decided that the teacher is in crisis and wants you there, that's a much different situation to be in. So if we want to work effectively in schools, teachers and other staff members need to be on our side. Or more importantly, we need to be on their side, and we need to communicate this. So our soft skills are very, very important. Teachers need to feel comfortable that we're there to help and we're not there to judge them. So don't judge them. Teachers are products of their environment. We want to establish ourselves as reinforcers by expressing an interest in the outcomes for teachers and their everyday lives. At the end of the day, we want teachers to run to us and not from us. That is the hallmark of an effective behavioral consultant in schools. So, teachers learn what they learned because of their interactions with their environment. So it's not fair to call them lazy or unmotivated. No one sets out to be a bad teacher. The environment creates bad teachers. We need to create environments that help teachers succeed. And then lastly, mistake number 8 is thinking that behavior analysis is the only way. Here's some breaking news. People other than behavior analysts have valuable ideas and skills. We often lament our PR problems, but they are largely of our own making. Behavior analysts often go in and poo-poo everyone else's ideas and act like they own they own all of the best ideas for intervening with behavior. I could tell you stories of how other professionals have really increased the effectiveness of interventions that myself and my team have designed. So we need to give them the opportunity to do that. We need to work in earnest, in collaboration with other professionals. We also need to remember that for many people we encounter, what they think of behavior analysis comes down to what they think of us, because we're the only representative of behavior analysis they've ever known. So behavior analysis is you. So we need to be good stewards of our science, and it's up to us to make a good impression of ourselves and of the science that we represent. Here are my contact details if you want to get in touch for additional information. And we have time now for some questions. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask. I'll give you a little bit of time if you want to write down any of those email address, and then I'll move on to the references page. I do apologize for having the world's longest email address. So now I'll just move on to a few of the references that I mentioned. It doesn't look like we have any questions so far that I can see. Let me just refresh the page to make sure. Okay. Can you tell us any more about your January workshop? In the January workshop, I'm going to be doing a couple different topics. First is one on the good behavior game and how to implement the good behavior game in schools, and also sharing a good bit of the research that we've been doing on the good behavior game and the different ways that it can be implemented. And how that may affect outcomes for the good behavior game. We're also starting a trial of doing the good behavior game with families as a parenting intervention, so I'll be talking a little bit about that work as well. And then the second part of the January workshop will be looking at effective functional analyses within schools, particularly using trial-based FAs. Let's see. I'm really interested in collaboration between school-based SLPs and BCBAs. Do you have any favorite resources for this? Actually, that's a great question to which I do not have an answer for. I think that idea of collaboration is something that is incredibly important to moving us forward in terms of our acceptance in schools, and also I think to a large extent the effectiveness of our interventions. But in terms of particular resources that would I suspect what you're saying is giving SLPs kind of a taste of what behavior analysis is. I'd have to have a little bit of a think and a search for that. So whoever sent that question, if you want to contact me directly, I'll see if I can help you with that. The next question is, do you support staff and students in middle schools? Yes, actually, I'm doing some work now in secondary schools. We don't have middle schools in the UK. We have primary schools and secondary schools. So kids go to secondary school at what would be about the equivalent of 7th grade in the States. And oh my goodness, those are scary places to be. But we're doing more and more work in secondary schools. In the workshop in January, I'll share some data with you of doing a trial-based FA in a high school classroom. This was actually in a school with kids with emotional and behavioral disorders, and we did a trial-based FA there and got some really nice results from that. And we're also going to be doing some research this autumn on doing the good behavior game with older kids. You can't call it the good behavior game when you're working with secondary school kids, but you have the same contingency. So I'll be presenting some of that work in January. So the simple answer is yes, the things that I'm talking about are certainly applicable to working with older kids. And yes, oh man, we have to wait until January. Yes, they only gave me 45 minutes today, and I've gone way over time already. Let's see. Oh, this is a great question. Do you see any future in collaboration of BCBAs and instructional evaluation for mainstream teachers, offering insight into the system's curriculum and outcomes of existing schools? I'm really glad that you asked this question, because I think we have so much to add in schools with regard to behavioral instructional methods, those kind of general Tier 1 methods like response cards and guided notes and those types of things, and also more specified systems like direct instruction, peer tutoring, those things that we know have a strong evidence base. So I think definitely we need to be, I think the thing that gets us our foot in the door in mainstream schools is the behavior issues, because most schools deal with them. But then once they're in there, then we can say, hey, you know what? We can help you with some of your academic problems as well. So that's definitely important work that needs doing. I run into a problem of teachers gathering data for the primary person of getting the student into special education. Any strategies to change teachers' motivation? Well, that can be a very strong motivation for teachers to collect data. I think one of the things that it's helpful for us to do very quickly, particularly with kids with special education needs, is to show what these kids are capable of. I think that the expectations for kids with special education are quite low, and those expectations get perpetuated across time. So I think the sooner that we can put teachers in contact with success for working with these kids, then probably the more we're going to kind of sway them. I think another thing that I found helpful in working with teachers who their primary motivation of having you there is to tick a box that said that they've done something so that this child can be referred for special education, is to acknowledge from the outset that might be a possibility, that special education, you're not taking that off the table, but that you need to have a full assessment so that they realize from the outset that you're not working at odds with them, that they're not working to get the kid out while you're working to keep the kid in. So acknowledging that may be a possibility can be helpful. My dream is that this is a comment, my dream is that ABA becomes standard in pre-service teaching for teachers. That's my dream too. We share that dream. Hopefully one day that'll come true. Let's see. Next question. Have you shared your findings with general ed teachers, and how do you communicate the correlation between their skills and competence and behavior management? Oh, I don't tell them that. I don't tell them, that the reason why they lack confidence is because they have poor classroom management skills. What I try to do is come in and tell them, let's see if we can find some strategies that are going to be helpful to you, that are going to make your life better. And if your life is better, then the life of the kids in your classroom is going to be better. Because, going back to my little sea monkey analogy, the teacher is the one that creates that little ecosystem and that habitat within his or her classroom. So I think it's important for us to communicate from the outset that we're there to help the teacher as much as we're there to help the kids. And it's not that the teacher is doing something wrong. It's that maybe the teacher could be doing something differently that would make her more successful. And I think that really comes back to that point of not judging, because teachers are doing what they do because that's what their environments have taught them to do. Nobody sets out to be a bad teacher. Let's see. One other question. Do you have any presentations or resources specifically addressing target behaviors in children diagnosed with ASD in general education settings who have a behavior aid? I don't have any presentations on that because that's really not my my area of expertise. But again, if the person who asked this question, if you want to contact me directly, then I can see if I can try to chase up some resources for you that might be helpful. And I think we are just about out of time, and we've come to the end of the question. Just let me have a quick look through.
Yeah, Jen, I think that's all of them.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. Jen, as always, that was amazing. I'm going to send you a copy of the chat room because you got a lot of virtual cheering in the chat room. A lot of
nice.
Things, super helpful. So I'll send you a copy of that, but it sounds like everybody loved it and the information was going to be really useful for everyone. So, if we were live in a room, this is when everybody would clap.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Just to let everybody know, watch for an announcement about the January workshop. We'll make sure that everybody gets that. And again, you can get a link to the recording if you email me directly at kobelund@datafinch.com. And also, Jen, I'll follow up with you, but we had a few requests for your slides.
Okay.
And I hate to put you on the spot, but I've basically
that's all right. I'm happy to share them. I will need to take out some copyrighted information, but I'm happy to pass those along so that you can share them with whoever wants them.
Okay, done. Well, everybody, if you're still listening and you want the slides, then just email me and I'll pass them on to. Or, well, no, I'll keep everybody out of your hair, Jen. Just email me for them and I'll pass them on. So thanks again, everybody, and watch for announcements about the next one.
Thank you, Kobe. Thanks, everyone.